In 1965, Singapore was expelled from Malaysia with no natural resources, no interland, and a population riddled with unemployment. Today, this tiny island nation boasts a nominal GDP of over $730 billion and ranks first, globally in economic competitiveness. What you're about to discover is how Singapore transformed itself from a struggling port city into one of the world's most sophisticated economies by strategically building 5 dominant industries from the ground up. We'll trace each industry from its uncertain beginnings in the 1960s through the extraordinary heights they've reached by 2025. This is the story of deliberate strategy, unwavering execution, and an economic transformation unmatched in modern history. Section 1. Manufacturing from mosquito coils to AI semiconductors. When Singapore gained independence in 1965, manufacturing accounted for just 12% of the economy. The government faced a crisis. How do you employ thousands of workers with no industrial base and no natural resources? The answer came through the Economic Development Board, established in 1961. Their strategy was audacious for a newly independent nation, aggressively coerced foreign multinational corporations to set up manufacturing operations in Singapore, while other developing nations pursued protectionist policies. In the 1960s, Singapore opened its borders wide. The first factories were humble, producing matches, fish hooks, and mosquito coils, but within a decade, everything changed. In 1968, when National Semiconductor expressed interest in Singapore, they needed to begin production within 2 months. The Economic Development Board delivered a factory ready for operations in just 2 weeks. This speed and efficiency caught the attention of American electronics giants. Texas Instruments, Fairchild, and Seiko soon followed. The transformation accelerated through distinct phases. The 1960s focused on labor-intensive manufacturing. The 1970s shifted to skill-intensive production as Singapore reached full employment. By the 1980s, the nation moved into capital-intensive industries, establishing itself in petrochemicals and precision engineering. The 1990s brought technology-intensive manufacturing, and from the 2000s onward, Singapore positioned itself for knowledge and innovation-intensive production. By 1975, manufacturing share of GDP had climbed to 22%. Real GDP grew at an average of 13% annually from 1966 to 1973, one of the highest growth rates in the developing world. Today, manufacturing accounts for just 12% of Singapore's workforce but contributes 17.3% to GDP, a remarkable productivity achievement that reveals the success of decades of automation and value chain upgrading. The electronics cluster became Singapore's largest manufacturing sector. By 2025, machinery and equipment represent 43% of total exports, dominated by electrical machinery and data processing machines. Singapore now controls 10% of the worldwide semiconductor chip market and 20% of global semiconductor chip equipment production. The surge in artificial intelligence applications has driven unprecedented investment, with the Economic Development Board securing over $13 billion in fixed asset investments in 2024 alone. The Biomedical Sciences Cluster represents another government master, launched as a strategic initiative in the year 2000. Between 2000 and 2019, the biomedical manufacturing industry recorded a compound annual growth rate of 7.77% in jobs, dramatically outpacing the overall manufacturing sector's growth of just 0.68%. Recent investments include AstraZeneca's landmark end-to-end antibody drug conjugate manufacturing facility, marking Singapore's evolution from assembly operations to capturing highly complex, proprietary pharmaceutical processes. To address productivity constraints from an aging workforce, Singapore embraced Industry 4.0 solutions. The National Additive Manufacturing Innovation Cluster accelerates adoption of hybrid and digital manufacturing technologies, essential to the Manufacturing 2030 vision. The result? A manufacturing sector that employs minimal labor but generates maximum value, the hallmark of a truly advanced economy. Section 2. Finance and Insurance Building. Asia's capital gateway. While manufacturing built Singapore's industrial base in the 1990s, a parallel revolution was quietly taking shape that would position Singapore as the financial nerve center of Asia. Singapore's financial services story begins with an innovative regulatory decision in 1968. The Monetary Authority of Singapore, established in 1971, created a separate licensing structure called Asian Currency Units, allowing banks to accept deposits in US dollars and other major foreign currencies from non-residents, with the crucial sweetener of waived withholding tax. This created the Asian dollar market, essentially an offshore money and capital market dealing in foreign currencies. It was a strategic must. Singapore had a geographic advantage, bridging the time gap between the close of American markets and the opening of European business. Two key advisors, banker J.D. Vanonen and economist Albert Winstein, recognized this opportunity in the late 1960s. Timing proved fortuitous. Expatriate Chinese merchants held substantial dollar holdings, and U.S. spending on the Vietnam War flooded the region with dollars. As borrowers in countries like South Korea and Australia began raising money in Singapore, the Asian dollar market exploded. Bond issuance rose from a single $10 million issuance in 1971 to 22 issuances, totaling $1.2 billion by 1981. Asian currency unit assets grew at 22% per annum during the 1980s. If you're finding this deep dive into Singapore's economic transformation valuable, hit that like button and subscribe for more documentary-style explorations of how nations build extraordinary economies. The 1997 Asian financial crisis became a pivotal moment. Rather than retreat, Singapore accelerated financial liberalization. The government introduced qualifying full bank licenses to encourage foreign banking presence, increased the number of restricted banks, and lifted the 40% foreign shareholding limit in local banks. The sale of the Post Office Savings Bank to the Development Bank of Singapore in 1998 created the largest bank in Southeast Asia. By 2024, finance and insurance contributed 14.3% to Singapore's nominal GDP. The sector's institutional strength is evidenced by its AAA credit rating from all three major rating agencies, a distinction shared by only a handful of nations globally. Singapore ranks as Asia-Pacific's largest foreign exchange center and manages two-thirds of all project financing across ASEAN. It serves as one of the largest offshore clearing centers for the Chinese renminbi, positioning itself as the key financial conduit between China and Southeast Asia. Beyond traditional finance, Singapore ranks 7th globally in the Startup Genome Ecosystem ranking and first in Pan, attracting global founders and fostering explosive growth in fintech and digital services. In 2024, the finance and insurance sector added 5,300 new resident jobs, reflecting continued strength in high-skilled employment. Section 3. Wholesale Trade, the distribution dynamo. Singapore's wholesale trade sector is the single largest contributor to the national economy, accounting for 20.3% of nominal GDP in 2024. This dominance reflects Singapore's fundamental role as a regional distribution and trading hub, a position centuries in the making. The sector's roots trace to Singapore's founding as a British trading post in 1819, when Sir Stamford Raffles declared it a free port. By the mid-19th century, Singapore had become a thriving entrepot, connecting Asia and Europe. Goods like tin, rubber, and spices flowed through its ports, establishing the trading culture that persists today. Post-independence, Singapore's trade strategy became even more aggressive. The nation's trade volume reaches approximately 350% of GDP, making it one of the most trade-dependent economies on Earth. This extreme openness could be a vulnerability, but Singapore mitigated the risk through strategic sophistication. The country ranks 6th globally on the Economic Complexity Index, indicating it exports goods embedded with high knowledge and technical complexity. Top exports in 2024 included machinery and equipment at 43% of total exports, petroleum products at 19%, chemical products at 13%, and oil bunkers at 7%. The wholesale trade sector benefited enormously from Singapore's extensive network of free trade agreements, covering over 60% of global GDP. These agreements provide preferential access and reduce friction for multinational corporations using Singapore as a regional headquarters and distribution center. The sector's performance in 2024 was robust, serving as one of the major positive contributors to the 4.4% real GDP growth. The resilience of global demand, particularly for technology-related products and high-value trade flows, provided substantial momentum as Singapore continues expanding its trade agreements and deepening relationships with emerging markets. The wholesale trade sector remains positioned as an enduring pillar of the economy. Section 4. Transportation and storage. The logistics backbone. Singapore's transportation and storage sector contributed 9.1% to nominal GDP in 2024, but its strategic importance far exceeds this figure. The sector forms the physical infrastructure that enables Singapore's role as a global logistics and connectivity hub. The Port of Singapore stands as the crown jewel. Its maritime history extends to the 13th century when Singapore was known as Thammasat, serving as an important port along the maritime Silk Road. However, the modern port's story accelerates dramatically after independence. In 1964, the Port of Singapore Authority was established, replacing the Singapore Harbour Board. Post-independence port developments in the 1960s and 70s were intrinsically linked to the rapid industrialization program. Jurong Port opened in 1965 to handle bulk cargo for industries in the Jurong Industrial Estate. The transformative moment came with containerization. In the late 1960s, the Port of Singapore Authority made a bold, forward-looking investment building Southeast Asia's first container terminal at Pagara. Construction began in 1969 with a $45 million World Bank loan, and the terminal opened on June 23, 1972. The first container ship, Nihon, arrived that same year. This was a calculated risk. Demand was uncertain, and no shipping companies had committed to building container vessels to serve the region. But the gamble paid off spectacularly. Container traffic grew rapidly, and by 1975, Singapore claimed position as the world's third busiest port after Rotterdam in New York. By the 1980s, Singapore had reached 1 million 20-foot equivalent units. By 1990, it had 5 million TEUs, making Singapore the world's largest container port. Today, the Port of Singapore is the world's busiest port in terms of total shipping, handling over 1.15 billion gross tons. It ranks as the world's second busiest port in terms of container volume, and it transships a fifth of the world's shipping containers and half of the world's annual crude oil supplies. The port operates 24/7 with advanced berthing systems, minimizing vessel turnaround times. Currently handling approximately 37 million TEUs annually, the ongoing development of the Tuas Mega Port demonstrates Singapore's commitment to maintaining competitive scale for future decades. When fully operational, Tuas will have capacity for 65 million TEUs annually, with over 1,000 battery-powered driverless vehicles and almost 1,000 automated yard cranes, the largest fully automated terminal in the world. Complementing maritime logistics, Changi Airport reinforces the air cargo component. It handles over 2 million tons of air cargo annually, connected by over 100 airlines to more than 380 cities worldwide. The aviation sector, combined with port operations, creates an unmatched logistics ecosystem. But here's what truly sets Singapore apart. It's not just the physical infrastructure, it's the institutional framework that makes global supply chains choose Singapore over competitors. Singapore benefits from a robust, transparent legal system, minimal corruption ranked among the world's lowest, and streamlined customs processes. These institutional advantages provide the long-term certainty and predictability that complex global supply chains and capital flows demand. While neighboring countries rapidly developed physical infrastructure, Singapore's institutional excellence remains difficult to replicate. Therein lies its enduring competitive moat. Section 5. Information and Communications. The digital transformation. The information and communications sector contributed 6% to Singapore's nominal GDP in 2024, but its influence permeates every corner of the modern Singaporean economy. This sector represents Singapore's evolution into a smart nation and its positioning for the digital economy of the future. Singapore's telecommunications infrastructure developed rapidly between 1966 and 1973 during the early industrialization period. Postal, telegraph, telephone, and telex services evolved quickly to support manufacturing and trade activities. However, the sector's strategic elevation began in earnest in the 1990s and 2000s as Singapore recognized that information technology would be a critical competitive advantage. The sector's growth accelerated alongside the rise of modern services after the 1985 recession. Information and communications became recognized as one of the twin engines of economic growth alongside manufacturing, financial services, telecommunications, and professional services increasingly integrated, creating synergies that amplified Singapore's value proposition as a business hub. By 2024, the sector demonstrated continued strength, recording positive growth and adding 4,200 new resident jobs concentrated in high-skilled positions. The growth was driven by resilient demand for digital solutions from regional economies and Singapore's own enterprises undergoing digital transformation. Singapore's Smart Nation 2.0 strategy, launched to build a society grounded in trust while fostering growth and empowerment, requires massive infrastructural commitment. The government is setting aside land for new data centers to manage the enormous volumes of data essential for global digital services. Active coordination is underway for deployment and sharing of underground fiber optic cables, telecommunication exchanges, and submarine telecommunication cables to optimize sea space and maintain global connectivity. A critical challenge emerged. Data centers consume tremendous energy. In response, the Infocom Media Development Authority launched the Green Data Center Roadmap. A pioneering regulatory innovation, is the world's first tropical data center standard, designed to accelerate energy efficiency by raising operating temperatures and reducing cooling demands in tropical climates. One enterprise successfully cut energy consumption for cooling by 7%, simply by raising operating temperatures from 23 degrees Celsius to 25 degrees Celsius. This innovation turns a geographic constraint, high ambient temperature, into an industrial asset. Singapore is developing proprietary expertise in sustainable tropical operations, creating knowledge that can be exported or used to attract regional firms seeking to comply with rising global environmental, social, and governance standards. This unique value proposition enhances Singapore's competitive position for future foreign direct investment. The information and communications sector also underpins Singapore's emergence as a regional startup hub, ranking 7th globally and 1st in Pan-Asia in the Startup Genome Ecosystem ranking. This vibrancy attracts global talent and creates a dynamic innovation ecosystem that continually refines Singapore's economic capabilities. From the uncertain days of 1965, when Singapore produced machias and mosquito coils, to 2025, when it manufactures antibody-drug conjugates and controls 10% of the global semiconductor market. From Hamba trading post to managing 2/3 of ASEAN, project financing from a single container terminal to the world's largest automated port, the transformation is staggering. These 5 industries didn't emerge by accident. They represent decades of strategic planning, aggressive investment in infrastructure and human capital, and unwavering commitment to moving up the value chain. In 2025, Singapore upgraded its GDP growth forecast to around 4%, driven by continued strength in these core sectors, particularly manufacturing and wholesale trade, responding to global demand for AI-related semiconductors. The challenges ahead are significant: global trade tensions, rapid technological change, and the imperative to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. But Singapore's track record suggests a nation that consistently turns constraints into competitive advantages. If this deep dive into Singapore's economic transformation resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel for more documentary-style explorations of how nations build extraordinary economies. And here's a question for you. Which of Singapore's 5 industries do you think will be most critical for its success over the next 25 years? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Thanks for watching.